Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of an attempt to fly under the radar. This will be Part 9, Chapter 10, entitled Conspiracy. Izuku's feet barely touched the ground as he fidgeted in the chair in front of Principal Nezu's desk. He was sitting up straight, his back against the back of the chair as he tried not to watch the mouse, bear, dog looking over the IQ tests he took. He had been told by Mr. Hound Dog that the tests wouldn't affect his grades, but now that the bravado had worn off, he was terrified. Was he really as smart as they were saying he was? Yes, he was. Had he just been playing a long con over the years with his grades? No, he hadn't. How would a score change things in the future? He didn't know, and that was okay. He dared a peek at Principal Nezu through his bangs, and he didn't know how to feel, seeing the rather pleased gleam in his eye, as he looked back and forth from the test booklets to the answer keys. That meant he had done good, right? That meant that his best truly was his best, right? Yes, it did mean that. Well, well, Midoriya, Principal Nezu said, looking up from the test and folding his hands, together. I must say, you are a rather remarkable young man. Izuku bit his lip, cringing at the blush appearing on his face. He was blushing in front of the principal. What had his life come to? Remarkable. That wasn't a word most people used when describing him. All he ever really heard was plain, problem, useless, reckless, and other variations of these words. To be called remarkable by Principal Nezu of all people felt surreal. Remarkable how, Principal Nezu? He softly asked. The dog-bear mouse simply smiled back at him. You performed exactly as I expected you to, he said, a hint of pride in his voice as he laid the results out in front of him. Though it was great fun giving you a challenge in the form of 2 IQ assessments, the KABC needs to be supplemented by a second assessment, such as the WISC. Your performance in each index score was incredibly high, and your overall scores on both assessments show that you are profoundly gifted. On the KABC, you scored a 145, and on the WISC, you scored a 160. Izuku stared blankly at him, his heart pounding in his ears. He could hear what he was saying perfectly, but it wasn't absorbing in his brain. 145 and 160. Those were high scores, weren't they? Yes, those are both very high scores, Principal Nezu said, head cocked to the side in amusement. That meant he really was smart, didn't it? You have no need to hide your academic potential any more, Midoriya, Principal Nezu kindly said. We can ensure that your academic needs are properly being met now. The green-haired boy swallowed, folding his hands in his lap. He knew that on some level he should be happy to have the principal of UA praising him like this. He should be happy to hear that the scores didn't lie, that he really was smart, but... What does that mean for me? Will I have to switch classes? He asked, an unexpected fear gripping him. He had no love for Bakugo or Mr. Aizawa, but he couldn't leave the rest of his friends. What would he do without Uraraka, Ida, Tsuyu, or Todoroki? If he was going to be moved to another class, there was no guarantee that he would get lucky in the friend department. Hound Dog and I will be discussing this along with the rest of your teachers, but as of right now, we will be keeping you in 1A, the bear mouse dog reassured him. We wouldn't want to disrupt the cohesion that has developed between you and your class. As a compromise, we will be supplementing you with a more challenging curriculum designed by me. Izuku didn't like the devious glint in his principal's smile as he set the test booklets and score sheets aside. Now that we know what your mind is capable of, we wouldn't want you to become complacent, would we? Izuku shrugged helplessly, shaking his head. He had a vague feeling that Principal Nezu and his teachers' definitions of challenging were complete opposites, but he had to take his wins wherever he could. But what he said about classroom cohesion? Did he really have that with 1A? Sure, he liked his classmates. They were easy to get along with, and enduring the USJ incident and the training camp attack only brought them closer in a way that the other classes couldn't really understand, Class 1B being the exception. Heck, he counted Uraraka, Ida, Tsuyu, and Todoroki to be amongst his closest friends. Why didn't they do anything about Bakugo? The question was one he tried ignoring ever since the battle trials occurred, something that became increasingly difficult as the year went on and Bakugo got worse and worse. He would never admit it out loud, but it felt vindicating as he watched Todoroki break Bakugo's nose. He would never not be grateful to him for noticing. for not just standing by like everyone else did. He hated that it got him in trouble. He was defending someone from being brutalized. Uraraka tried. That was more than he could say about most, but she tried by telling them to just get along or just be friends. How could he be friends with someone who told him to kill himself because he was quirkless? How could he be friends with someone who backhanded him for trying to work together with him? How could he be friends with someone who constantly attacked him in front of other people because he knew no one would stop him? Even if Uraraka's claims were naive, she still tried calling Bakugo out, compared to how Kirishima, Sero, Mina, and Kaminari fawned over and followed Bakugo. And wasn't that hilarious? The two people who supposedly hated bullies and could never understand them counted one as their friend. They stood by as Izuku was beaten and insulted. They thought Bakugo was so manly for his quirk, and it was so funny how manliness, privilege, and potential were measured by if you had a powerful quirk, let alone a quirk at all. It felt much less like a slap to the face because she didn't smile and laugh with Izuku before going to hang out with the boy who made his life a living hell. All that told him was that they condone his behavior. All that told him was, sorry he burns your things and wishes you would die, Midoriya, but he's strong and awesome and manly. What about Bakugo? Izuku blurted out. When he heard how forceful the question came out, the hidden anger that leaked out momentarily, he cringed. Sorry, he whispered. I didn't mean to yell at you. Principal Nezu folded his hands together, and nodded thoughtfully. Ah, yes. Your classmates' behavior has certainly had an effect on your class's cohesion as of late, not to mention its negative effect on your well-being. His ears pricked back, tail wagging for a moment before he relaxed. He was smiling serenely again, his eyes kind as he said, Rest assured, you won't need to worry about him coming in the way of your growth as a student and a hero anymore, Midoriya. Izuku furrowed his brow. He wouldn't. Sure, and he's the Prime Minister of Japan. The world would probably end before Bakugo ever faced consequences for his behavior. I won't? How come? Principal Nezu ignored his question, still smiling as though he heard a particularly funny joke as he opened one of his desk drawers to take out some forms. I think we've kept you here long enough, Midoriya, he said conversationally. Why was he dodging his question? Why don't you enjoy the rest of your day? You're dismissed. Izuku stood and made his way to the door. Though his encounter with Principal Nezu had gone much better than he anticipated, he couldn't wait to get out of his office. Nice or not, he was still the principal. You can also disregard the apology letter assigned to you by Mr. Aizawa, he called out after him. After all, it's gotten in the way of your educational development, wouldn't you say? Izuku narrowed his eyes. This was getting weird. First, something happened to Bakugo the Principal Nezu was being rather cagey about. Then he doesn't have to write his apology letter anymore? He wasn't complaining, since he'd admittedly been putting it off, but he felt like there was a conspiracy going on right under his nose, and the answer was right in front of him. He wanted to ask what that little comment was supposed to mean, but he had a feeling he would be ignored again. Make sure you get plenty of rest, Midoriya. I'd like to start you on your new curriculum tomorrow, Principal Nezu said as he waved him out, that weird smile still on his face. Weird. Principal Nezu was weird. Principal Nezu was a nice but weird mammalian being. Hopefully Izuku would get answers to his questions once he got back to the dorms. He felt like he wouldn't sleep until he did. All right, listeners, this concludes Chapter 10 of An Attempt to Fly Under the Radar. Chapter 11 is going to be up next. I hope you all are still enjoying this fic. Let me know your thoughts and reactions to this chapter. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.